Welcome everyone to Sephardic World, brought to you by the Sephardic Genealogical Society. As always, we welcome our patrons who make all of this possible. We welcome our viewers on YouTube. And today I have the pleasure to introduce David Mendoza and myself. And we will present you with a beginner's guide for tackling the vast archives of the Portuguese Inquisition. I will talk about one particular register which is of very great interest, and David will talk about how to read the processor and how to get access to them.
Can you make yourself full screen on the slide, please?
You can't see it full screen?
No, I can see the other slides down the side.
Oh, we are experiencing some technical problems here. I don't know how to do that because I see something else myself.
At the bottom, just
yes. This one.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Thank you, David.
You didn't press it, or it didn't work for me, but no worries. Then start with what we've got. If
maybe I should. Is it okay now?
It's the same.
And like this?
Still the same. Somebody's asking whether you use more than one screen, which you do. So
I do. So I'll just shut down the other screen and hope it works. Sorry, folks. I hope it's okay now.
Still the same. Don't worry. Just begin, and
yeah,
we'll manage.
And okay. And now
the same.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry. Just let's just start with this. It's big enough. We can see.
Yeah. Maybe if I do it like this. Okay, in 1536, under pressure from the Spanish crown, and with the consent of Pope Paul III, King João of Portugal introduced the Inquisition, very much along the lines of those of that in Spain. According to the Pope, its task lay in prosecuting heretics, but from the very beginning, both the crown and leading old Christians took aim at the new Christians and conversos. It was the Inquisition was abolished in 1821 and had tribunals in Lisbon, Evora, Coimbra, and Goa. The Inquisition archives of Goa have burned and are not available anymore. Those of Lisbon have mostly been digitized, less so those of Evora and Coimbra. in Lisbon, they say that those archives in a much worse shape and need restoration before they can be digitized. The Inquisition archives are in the care of the Portuguese National Archives in the Torre.
Ton, you're still showing the first slide.
Ah,
If you click on the slides by the side.
yeah, I did. And like this. Maybe if you share the slides.
I'll do that.
I will stop sharing.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
It's showing the Torre de Tombo slide. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
This is the start of the. This is the portal of the Portuguese National Archives, and part of it are the Inquisition archives, but they have much more. And very important also the parochial archives of various towns and villages in Portugal. They are not easy to find, but they are there. Next slide. So the Inquisition started in 1537. It proceeded during the 16th century, but in 1605, King Philip III of Spain, also known as Philip II in Portugal, needed money for his wars against the Dutch and the English. At his request, Pope Clement III issued a general pardon in 1605. It had been negotiated by Heitor Mendes de Brito, the Rich, and father of the oppressed, as he was always known, and by Rodrigo de Andrade. When the latter was in Rome for negotiations about the general pardon, his wife, Ana de Melao, was arrested by the Inquisition. The Inquisition apparently wasn't happy with the pardon and tried to sabotage it. The king intervened on her behalf, but she was only set free after the pardon was issued. Eventually, Philip III received 700,000 cruzados plus bribes. All prisoners were pardoned and declared not guilty, and they were freed. An important provision in the general pardon was also that existing files would not be used again against future suspects. Next slide. Here is the cover of a register that is known as Repertorio Geral dos Homens Culpados. In the Inquisition, the pardon, general pardon, lasted only for a year. Some people returned, mainly from France, in the mistaken belief that the Inquisition was gone forever, like the families of Menas ben Israel and Isaac Aboab. They later became rabbis in Amsterdam. But the family members of Manasseh and Isaac were imprisoned, tried, and after their release escaped to Holland. it must have taken a toll on their lives, and it must have impressed their later actions and beliefs and ideas. In 1606, the Inquisition came roaring back with a vengeance and more efficiency. They arrested some of the negotiators of the general pardon among the Jewish conversos, New Christians. The better efficiency was also shown by the introduction of an index. Next slide. These enormous bound volumes are known as the Rolls dos Culpados and are housed in the Torre de Tombo. And the purpose of this register was to record the given names and surnames in alphabetical order of all Portuguese, Old and New Christians anywhere in the world, and who from 1605 to the end of time were to stand accused of religious crimes like blasphemy, apostasy, witchcraft, but also crimes against the true Catholic religion by conversos who relapsed to Judaism, former Muslims who practiced their faith in secret, and also Protestants. They recorded everyone anywhere in the world, including those in Portugal, Spain, Brazil, India, Spanish America, Amsterdam, Hamburg, France, Italy, Salonika, Constantinople, and London. What you see here is the first page. And like I said, this was an index to given names, to first names. We are here at the bottom, Antonio, Alexandro, Alvaro, etc. And after that is a reference to the page where you can find those names beginning with Antonio, etc. What I always do when I see that number and I want to go to a page with all the names Fernando, I take that number that's there after the name, I double it, add 10, and then I go to that page in this register. I go to the scan number, the image number. The next slide. Some of these pages are very neat and very readable. Here's an example of Antonio Ferreira, and you can see that he had a lot of denunciations against him. And there's one at the bottom who has only one reference. Next slide. And some of these pages are very full and very difficult to read. And that's because before the register was opened and filled in with names, for each given name, a certain number of pages have been allotted. Like for Antonio, there were 30 pages. And if the pages became full, they began to fill in names on other pages. And the name Joao you can find throughout the whole register of 2,270 pages, which makes searching very difficult. Next slide. Here I have an example of one entry, and there are 3 columns. To the left is the place where someone resided at that moment, that he was betrayed by someone to the Inquisition. This is Alvaro Diniz, a person who lived in Hamburg and in Glückstadt and was very important to those communities there. He also published a book with 30 sermons under his own name. His alias was Samuel Yahya. And he was related to the Milao family. You see, after his name, XN, Cristão Novo, or New Christian. Casado con Beatriz Henriquez, a daughter of Henriquez de Milao. And sometimes you may find further details about such a name, like where he was born, or if he was taken by the Inquisition, or other biographical details. The column to the right is empty, but with other names you may see that someone was taken prisoner, and in which town, Coimbra, Lisbon, Evora, or Goa, or that he was condemned by the Inquisition with a short abstract of the sentence. After the name of Beatriz Henriquez, you see TTA, which stands for Testimonia. If you see that, you know this is a reference to a processo, to an Inquisition file. And you see that he is named in the processo of Vicente Furtado, also a name famous from Hamburg in this case. What you have to do next is to find the processo of Vicente Furtado and look for the date of 6 March 1609. Sais de Marco 1609. This date is important because the Inquisition files are all ordered chronologically. So it might begin 1607 and you might have to search for a long time until you go to 1609, because there might be hundreds of pages, but you will find the 6th of March 1609, and there you will find more information about this Alvaro Diniz. And you can see that he is mentioned at 5 or 6 processos. So if you look them all up, you will find different details everywhere. Next slide. I have one example which I followed up through the processos or Inquisition files. This is Henrique Nunes. He was from Porto. His Jewish name was Moses Zacuto, and he was the grandfather of the Remesh, Mordecai Zacuto, a famous Kabbalist in Italy. He was confeiteiro, which I always thought was a pastry maker. But lately I've come to understand that it might also be someone who produces sugar. And he had a factory for that. At this time he also lived in Hamburg, but before that he lived also in Amsterdam. And here you see that his name is mentioned in the processo of Vicente Furtado, also on 6 March of 1609. So in that processo you find his name and that of others who lived in Hamburg. And next slide. Here's that processor Vicente Furtado. I have the file number, which is 3333. This is from image 27, and David will explain later how that works. E Enrique Núñez Cristão Novo Confeiteiro Morador que foi nesta cidade, casado com her mulher que foi presa nesta Inquisição, que ela está lá com ela. So, here's an extra piece of information. His wife has been taken prisoner by the Inquisition. Unfortunately, we do not know her name. If we knew her name, we could look up her processor and find additional information. You see other names in the margin. That's a habit of the Inquisition to put names in the margin for faster reference. Next slide. This is from another processor which also names Enrique Núñez Confeiteiro, natural desta cidade, and in this case that means Porto, e sua mulher e filhos. And here's a new piece of information because his wife is visible. And we saw in the last processor that you have been taken prisoner by the Inquisition. So this must have been from some later date. And he has sons. In total, he had 4 sons, 2 daughters. And it's an eventful life. And the next slide. To sum it up, there are more than 2,200 pages in this register, 5 to 6 persons on the page, 11,000 to 12,000 names, about 100,000 references. That's a crude guess because I haven't counted them all. It offers biographical information. It offers information about sentences. And it's a good index for the first half of the 17th century. After that, the vigilance with which names were noted down diminished. And it's less good for the second half of the 17th century, and even less good for the first half of the 18th century, and it stops in 1766. This is a register for men only, and there's a separate register for women. It seems possible that an exhaustive examination of all the data in the Rois dos Culpados might bring further processes to light about people, for instance, in Amsterdam, Hamburg, France, Livorno, etc., etc. And they could enrich our knowledge of the Portuguese communities everywhere, also in Brazil, also in Livorno, Italy, etc., etc. So these registers are of immense historical and genealogical value. It would be nice if we could have an index to not everything, but to the names that are mentioned, and the cities that are mentioned, and a reference to the page where you can find them. And that's it for me, I believe.
Thank you, Ton. And I'll just see if I can Oops, sorry, get back to full screen. Okay, so Ton's discussed the Livro dos Homens, which of course is not the only index, because the modern National Archives have made their own, and this is just a quick look from the top down of the Inquisition archives, the Tribunal do Santo Officio, the Tribunal of the Holy Office. And if you look on the left side of the screen, we see that it's organized by the Conselho Geral do Santo Officio, so it's the sort of general office, the headquarters, and then by the various tribunals, of which Coimbra, Évora, and Lisbon are the most important. If you look in the center where it talks about dimension and support, we can see that there are 79,337 processos. That's basically files for individuals, of which I'm not sure, I think about half of them probably reference people accused of Judaizing. And this is the simple search page. This is very much an introductory talk, and at future date we'll go into much more detail. If you look at the very bottom of the screen, you will see a link to this page, and you can see from the top there are more advanced ways of searching as well. But let's keep it very simple for the moment. And what we're going to do is just look at easy ways to search. And then within a specific processor, we will be looking at marginal notes and signatures and the genealogy section. So let's see if I can get myself to wonderful. So this is the page we just looked at. And let me just look for my own family, my own surname, Mendonça, obviously being the Portuguese version of Mendoza. And here we see it's quite an unusual name in Portugal, but we still have over 10,000 results, which isn't very helpful. So that what we're doing here, of course, is we have got to the point, perhaps in the Amsterdam records, London, Bordeaux, Bayonne, wherever, where we have traced back as far as we can within the Jewish records. And we are now trying to look in Inquisition records to see if we can find the same families. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. I think quite a good technique is to look at the various earliest families, say living in Amsterdam, and just take those names, because often you'll find the same names in the Jewish community as in the Inquisition archives. So, for example, in my family, we have Mendonças and Castro, and always if you put in the word Judaismo, Judaism, that will narrow it down to those files. And if you put in the word processo, you will just get processos. So let's do a quick search on that. And here we see there's only 6 results, which is because there's quite a rare name on Mendonça. If you're searching for sort of Gomez or Nunez, you'll still have like 50 pages to trawl through. And you can see here, for example, we have a processo de Francisco Carlos, who's obviously not called a Mendonça or a Castro, but possibly he was married to a Mendonça, or there was a Castro there. And of course, Castro can also mean castle, so it can be a place. But for my family, what immediately springs out is the Processo de Miguel de Mendonça Valladolid. And the reason for that is in the Amsterdam marriage bans, we have a family marriage of somebody coming from Valladolid. And so the conjunction of quite an unusual name, Mendonça, with the city of Valladolid in Spain and the Castro surname is hopefully a clue. And so, first of all, not everyone speaks Portuguese, and this is in Google Chrome, so I can just click and translate everything into English. if that's easier for people. So we see here at the top the case of Miguel de Mendonça Valladolid. We have the reference number. We have the date range. So this is a case which started on the 10th of April, 1728, and that's the date of the earliest document, and maybe that's when the warrant for his arrest was put out, and that's the date it ends. It's 353 pages, which is quite long, remembering that it's normally on both sides. I tell you what, if I make this a bit bigger, it will be easier for everyone to read. And we see his social status is a new Christian, and he's aged 43. So, you know, we have the date he was arrested, so we can work out roughly his date of birth. And if we think back to the Amsterdam marriage bans, for example, which give people's ages, sometimes we can find the same person there. He's accused of Judaizing. The translation hasn't worked very well here. It says crook. In Portuguese, it's tratante, which is like a trader. He was born in Valladolid in the Kingdom of Castile in Spain. And again, not brilliant translation. He was living at a sitio. It's like a little farmstead of Nossa Senhora de Penha de França in São Paulo, which was then part of the Diocese of Rio de Janeiro. So he's in Brazil. And it gives us his parents' name, João de Castro de Mendonça, Ana Maria de Castro, remembering, of course, that in Spain, these names will be spelt differently, and also remembering people use different names in different places. But we also see that he's married to this lady, Maria Nogueira Falcão, and he was arrested on the 26th of November, 1729, which is quite a while after the warrant was issued. But remember that the warrant was issued in Lisbon, and he was in Brazil, and this is the early 18th century. So, and he was sentenced on the 17th of June, 1731, confiscation of goods, major excommunication, and relaxed to secular justice. That means he was handed over to the secular authorities to be burnt alive, because they couldn't cover their hands with somebody's death. So let's go back to the files, and let's just have a very quick look at what we've got. So I said to look at three different things, and we've also already seen in the Livro dos Homens that one person's case can be mentioned in another. And so let's suppose that somebody was interested in his cousin Guiomar de Rosa, having looked her up first of all in the Livro dos Homens that Tom was showing. The purpose of the margin is just to make it easier when people are flicking through, and so somebody can find this lady much faster, as of course can you doing your own research. And of course it's much easier to read in the margin as well. So that's a way of helping. So the second thing we said to look at was signatures. And there's two reasons here. Obviously, we don't have anything material passed down from people of those generations, or normally not. But here we have somebody's signature, which is really intimate, writing his own name. And a secondary use, which a trick I learned from Michael Was, is that even if the given name is different between, say, a Catholic and a Jewish jurisdiction, the signature will look more or less the same. So if we could find, say, this something that looks just like this signature but with a different given name, say in a ketubah in London, Amsterdam, wherever, or in the Amsterdam civil bans, or in the notarial archives, then we can possibly be confident that we're looking at the same person. And this is, of course, another way to bridge that gap. And the third thing that we said we would look at was the Genealogy, the genealogy section of the Inquisition processo. So these Inquisition files, they followed a format that there was just a book was sent out to everyone, and they said, you know, this is how you write each section, which makes life much easier for us if we are trying to read manuscript in a foreign language. And what I suggest you do is you just go through the folder until you find the genealogy section. And we can see in the margin here, we start with an abbreviation of his name, Miguel de Mendonça Valladolid. And it might be difficult to read, but we've already seen it in the index that the Portuguese National Archives have provided. And that's sort of our key, because perhaps once we can start working out that that's an M and that's a G, it makes life easier on the other words. And say in this processo, we have 2 pages of genealogical information. Of course, not everything here is true, but this is from the early 18th century, which for my Ashkenazi side of the family would be just unimaginable to have this sort of quality of information. So if we go on to the second page, it always starts with the prisoner, and here we have the last word on the previous page was Valladolid, and we see the word Valladolid again. Here we see the word Tratanci, which was in the page from the National Archives, and we see he was a natural born in the Cidade de Valladolid, Reino de Castella. Again, though, we've seen a lot of these words before, so hopefully it will make our life easier. And here we see that he is where he was living in São Paulo in the marginal notes. After the person themselves, again, if we look at the margin, we see país, parents, and we already know the names. So here we have João de Castro de Mendonça going on to the next line. But we see that his parents here are já falecidos, that they're already dead, which is what he tells them. Which may or may not be true. And again, his mother's name, which we've seen before, Ana Maria de Castro. And the point is that it's not as frightening, these documents, as it may at first seem. And, you know, after about a few minutes just looking at the manuscript, if you know a few words, the other ones begin to appear, especially as they always have the same, you know, naturales, born in, and moradores, and so on. And he tells here that his parents were naturales and moradoras da Cidade de Valladolid. So he's saying that his parents were born and lived in Valladolid, which is actually completely untrue. His father was born in the town of Jaén and his mother in Seville. Both his parents were tried by the Spanish Inquisition, and it's perhaps he was worried that the Portuguese Inquisition would contact the Spanish Inquisition, or perhaps he was trying to protect relatives and so on. And here I mean, Ton has already told us about XN. X is Christian and N stands for new. So XXNN, they're both new Christians. And here's just another section. After the parents, it will go into the grandparents, then it will go into the paternal relatives, and then the maternal relatives, and then the spouse and the children, and then it will go on to the knowledge, the baptism and knowledge of the Catholic catechism. And here it's just of interest because the tio paterno, tio is uncle, so it's paternal uncle, and it's just saying that he has one uncle, a chamado called Dom Antonio de Mendonça, Antonio de Mendoza, XN, and he's a maestre de armas. And again, he says Casado não sabe com quem. So he says he doesn't know who he's married to and doesn't know where he was born, which is again completely untrue. And later on in the processo, he says that he was living with this uncle in Amsterdam and names the wife and the children. So what we want to show really is that searching in the Inquisition archives is not as frightening as it may seem. I mean, initially you're not going to get as much out perhaps as an academic who's been studying it for years. But if you know what you're looking for, and largely we're looking for names of people, using the Livros dos Homens and using the catalogue, the index of the Torre de Tombo, the National Archives, is a way in. So we have raced through that because what we want to do next, and apologies to everyone on